So what I know about Álamos, its history and the church, even the church building, is anecdotal. I lived in Spain for 5 years before I came here. I'm from Los Angeles. In Spain, I never saw any of this architecture in Álamos, what you see in Álamos, until the final year, because I was in. So the rector of the seminary told me, he said, if you haven't seen Andalusia, you haven't seen the most typical part of Spain. So I went at the very last, I had one more week in Spain before I came here. I went down to Andalusia, which is, Seville, Granada, Malaga, places like that. And then I saw the architecture of Álamos, because I had come to Álamos in 1977, then I went back to finish one more year of studies in Spain. And at the end of that, they told me to see Andalusia. So the architecture you see in Álamos is completely from the south of Spain, Andalusia. The colonnades, portales, the arcs, even this kind of architecture is not the kind of architecture you see in the north of Spain. This is southern. So this church is a little over 200 years old. It's a little over 200 years old, but there was a church that was, just like what they call a tecaban. A tecaban is like a thing that has palm leaves on the top, and it's just a wooden structure. And then after that, a brick structure, and then the stone structure, which is this one, which has walls that are about 5 feet wide. The width of the buildings in Álamos is to keep out the heat in the summer. All the buildings are built, the old buildings are built between 2 feet and 5 feet wide, the walls. So we have baptismal certificates from 1682. And so the city of Álamos, because it doesn't have historical records, written before that time, they usually give the date of the founding of the city of Álamos as 1685. So we have baptismal certificates from that time. We even have the baptismal certificate of Maria Felix, the famous actress. She was also registered here. What else can I say? The church seats about 300 people. The pulpit up here was constructed, of course, before microphones were even thought of. So if I'm speaking at the altar, pardon? Before microphones were called. So the pulpit is placed in a part of the church where it gives perfect resonance, so that people can hear you actually better than using a microphone. I tried it once, and they could not hear what I was saying, so I went up to the pulpit on the right hand side, and they said they could hear me perfectly, any place in the church. So churches at that time were planned that way to have the point of where the preacher is going to speak could be heard in any part of the church. On the right-hand side over here, that used to be the baptismal font inside that little door there. On that side. This side is a confessional. But actually, before it was a confessional, it was used as a place to pull the bells. Mm-hmm. Today, if they want to hear the bells, we have to send somebody out. There's a room on the outside. There's a door. You have to get a special key. I went up there only one time in all these 44 years. They go up there and they have to walk over here to this side and then climb up into the bell tower and then ring them. They use them for the 6:30 a.m. Mass on Sundays. They start at 6 o'clock in the morning with one, go bong, and they go bong, 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 bong. That means you have half an hour to get to church. Then the second time it's at 6:15. They go twice. Bong, bong, then bong, 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 and bong, bong. That means you have 15 minutes. And when the last one sounds at 3, that means you're too late. You already got to be in the church. And that's what some people say it bothers them, to hear the church bells so early in the morning on Sundays. And it's also used again for the evening Mass. The evening Mass is at 6 p.m. Then we have two other Mass at 8:30 and 12 o'clock on Sundays. On weekdays, we only have one Mass in the evening, which is a 6 p.m. Mass. But, for example, yesterday we had two other funerals. We had a funeral at 3 o'clock and another one at 4 o'clock. Today we have another funeral at 4 o'clock and a 3:30 funeral in Nina's Likeness. So they call in, people have to be buried within 24 hours because they usually do not embalm. Embalming is a new thing that started about 30 or 40 years ago. Very few people use embalming. Okay, the Purísima Concepción is, the feast day is the 8th of December. And the reason it's the 8th of December is because that was the day that the Pope declared it a dogma in 1850. So before it was declared a dogma, it was still believed in. It was believed in the church in all the centuries. And Duns Scotus was the first one who said he was sure that that was in the 1300s. He died in 1308. Duns Scotus, who was from Scotland. So by the time Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared in 1531, her first apparition of the 4 apparitions was on December 9th. But December 9th, in that time, in the 16th century, was the date of the Purísima Concepción celebration. And it's interesting that George Washington in his office had a large painting in his office behind him of the Immaculate Conception by Purísima. He had, I don't know if it was a copy or what, but they say he had one of those. I've also told that when George Washington crossed the Potomac, if he had coins in his pockets, those coins were minted in Álamos. Because the United States was not a country. It did not have its own coins. So it had to ask for coins from Mexico. Have them minted. That's what I heard. Sometimes some things that you hear, there could be legends that have only a nucleus of truth. It's hard to tell. Because I'm not a historian. I'm just giving you anecdotal information that I heard, secondhand while living there. They were very wealthy people. They could send their children to school in Europe. And it was an amazing place. And that's why you see buildings that are 200 years old that are still in perfect condition. The Americans have fixed them up, of course, because by 1920, the population of the city itself was about 30,000 people. And today it's only about 10,000 people. When I got here, it was 5,000. And when I got here, we had probably 8 neighborhoods in Álamos. Now there are 40. There are 40 neighborhoods today. So another question that people usually have is, what about the so-called tunnel from somewhere back over here to the church? Okay, the person who told me about that recently, about a month ago, was Bucho Martinez. You know Bucho Martinez? Bucho Martinez said that in the house where Raimundo Robles used to live, which is on the corner before the Callejón de Obispo, the last house before you get to the community center of Narita on the corner. If you go underneath, if you go in the basement, there's a door that opens up and there's a tunnel that goes all the way to the church. I've never seen it, but he tells me that he knows a lot of things about Álamos. He's still alive. Abbreviation. This is Santiago. I think. See, they're abbreviating the words. They're being stylistic. They wrote it out. Yeah, before this church was built, there was a church that was probably started in the late 16th century. Small church. It was on 1550 or something like that. Then there was a brick church. And then the brick church they said they kept it on the inside until the outside was finished. Then they tore it down. They tore down the one that was the intermediate church. And then this one, they say on the outside that the first stone was laid in 1803. That's what it says over the door. But according to this history, it looks like it was previous to that they started building it. For buildings, it takes a long time in this country. So she considered that a sign from God or something to build a chapel. So she built this chapel. Okay, who is Our Lady of Zapopan? Zapopan is, the origin of it is right next to the city of Balvanera. There's a district called the Zapopan district. And that's where it started. I read about this many years ago. There was something like a miracle. Why are the statue of Our Lady of Zapopan is in the center of the world? The one dressed in red. Okay, why is it so small? The reason that they are so small, these little Madonnas, little statues of the Virgin Mary, is because missionaries had to carry them around with them on their horses. So they bring them as part of their equipment. So they're always so small. And so the original is the same size. This particular statue is, I think, 200 years old at least, the statue. And that's why they put it, about 20 years ago, they put it under glass. One of our seminarians did that. Rodolfo, what he did was, one day, there was a dry spell here. They had a drought for about 10 years or something. Since I've been here, I've had 3 droughts. Sometimes they last 8 years, or they last 10 years, or they last 11 years. Well, there was a drought, and he wasn't a priest yet, he was still a seminarian. So he says, can we talk about, after each Mass, encourage people to come to say the Rosary with this statue and we'll march in the streets of Álamos to ask for rain. And I said, yeah, okay. I doubted they would rain. But he came up after every Mass on Sunday and said, come out next Saturday in the morning, we're going to march with the Blessed Mother. So they came here. They brought the statue out. They didn't have that glass covering at that time. They took it out, and they got a couple of blocks, and it started raining horribly. So they had to come running back. And they said, we better put a protection on this. So they raised money, and they got this glass cover. I think it's probably plastic glass or glass, plastic. It's not glass. But that's all I can say about this church. So it's the 18th. It's Our Lady of the Expectation. And that's why it's before, December. Before December 25th. It's December 18th. But in Guadalajara, the interesting thing is that they celebrate in October. That's the biggest religious event in Guadalajara, is for Our Lady of Zapopan in October. I think it's October 23rd, 24th, 25th, or something. They have this huge celebrations. The streets are just packed with people, like we are missionaries, without all of the floats or anything like that. So that's all I can say about Our Lady of Zapopan. I did say a couple of Masses here once in English, because some of the Americans said, why don't we have an English Mass on Sundays? So I said, okay, let's try it here. Well, there were only 3 or 4 people who would come. The Swiggers were here, and quite a few other people missed it, so we said, forget it. In Puerto Vallarta, I remember once in the main church in Puerto Vallarta, you might have seen it, it's a crown on the top. I went over there and I said, I heard that you have a Mass in English on Sundays. And they said, yeah, it's always at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, if you want, I can say the Mass on Sunday if you need a priest who speaks English. And they said, okay, come by on Sunday. So I went over there. My sister had a time-sharing apartment in Puerto Vallarta. So I went up to the church and I celebrated the Mass on Sunday. It was packed with Americans and Canadians. So afterwards, the priest asked me to come and have breakfast with them. I saw there were about 5 priests. I said, at the breakfast, I said, which one of you, who among you speaks English? And they said, none of us do. And I said, well, how do you have a mass in English? Every Sunday at 11 o'clock. They said, no problem. We just say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We go on in Spanish. We preach in Spanish. The Americans are fine. They don't care because they're not listening to us anyway. They want to come to meet up with their friends. In other words, it's an event. It's an event. It's a social event. Okay, a vicar is like an assistant to the pastor. So, what else?
I have a question about Zapopan, and I heard that she gave it was protection in storms or something.
You know, that I don't know. But I vaguely remember it was a little girl that died or something like that. And she came back to life or something. That way back, I guess back at the beginning of the times in Guatemala.
Yeah.
It's a huge facility. Well, I wouldn't say it's huge, it's small. But it's very beautiful. Facility in Zapopan, Jalisco. It's very beautiful. The Pope visited there, Pope John Paul II, when he came to Guatemala. So it's a huge place. It's very, very ornate on the inside. But not really that large. It's like the cathedral of Hermosillo. You have seen that. It's very short. You go in there and it's not really that much. Not really large.
Another question. Is this chapel open once a month? Because
Okay, it was open on every 18th of the month. Because we have a priest that came over here to do Let me ask you if that they open every month.
I think I came by there.
Yeah, she says it's every 18th of the month. It's still every 18th. ¿Y celebra la misa también? No, they haven't answered. ¿A qué hora se hace? A las 6 at 6 p.m. on the 18th of the month.
I came by here on the morning, and that's the I left in February. And there was a band playing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, on the feast day, the morning of the feast day, they have the rockets and all that stuff, and the band, that's called the mañanitas. The mañanitas they start every night, half an hour before the mass, then they celebrate the mass. What else? Should we go to?
Well, I know one time you told me a lot of people wanted to get married in this chapel.
People like to get married in small chapels. And that's why, this chapel, the Hacienda de los Santos is going to have weddings every week. Because people like small chapels.
But is it impossible
Our
to get
problem,
married?
it's not impossible. The problem is, I would say, if there were a lot of priests, we could say that. For example, today, so we have to leave ourselves free for that reason. And the number of priests in the world is going down. For example, the diocese. The diocese is the area. In the state of Sonora, it includes Guaymas, Ciudad Obregón, Guanajuato, Álamos, Navajo, and the mountains.
Wow.
It's about the size of the state of Maine. Okay, we have about 100 priests. There are about 100 priests in the diocese. But this year, in the seminary, only one seminarian showed up in Obregón for this year's course. So there's actually a crisis of vocations for the priesthood. So what are we going to do in 8 years? In about 8 years, because it takes 8 or 9 years to become a priest. Where are you going to get priests? I'll be 77 in March. And, it's funny because you retire when you're 75. But if you're still able to walk and just keep working, you can't retire. So my brothers and sisters, I have seven sisters and 5 brothers. They constantly ask me to come and do this with us. I said, look, you guys are retired. I'm not retired. You want to have fun. So that's a little bit of the difficulty with the priesthood today. But even, people say, well, wasn't it because of the clergy scandals? The clergy scandals have a lot to do with it. But if you look at the clergy scandals in percentages, it's never more than 3%. But in numbers, it's horrible.
Yes.
In numbers, in pure numbers, it's terrible. And because a priest is supposed to be a moral model, it's even worse because it destroys the victim. So that's part of it. And then also another part of it is that young people today. First of all, there are less people being born today. Families. Mexicans are not getting they have 1 or 2 children in their families today. It's not like it was 20 years ago. When we first came here, young men would come to the door and knock on the door. Today, no. So, and then also, young people, from the time they're little kids, they've got their cell phone. And they're stuck on their cell phone. And all kinds of horrible things come in. And if it's not supervised, their minds are just, they're messed up. So if you say, you're going to come into a seminary, you got to be chaste, you got to be poor, you got to be obedient, they're going to say, no way. So that's one of the big difficulties we have, and that's why we don't have more opportunities of celebrating masses.
Well, I just want to say, one time, they ring the bell here when they have that service on the 18th. And one time, Carol and I heard the bell, and we said, well, let's see what's going on, And this was many years ago, and I think Father Fatima.
It was regular.
Yeah, and he was the priest. And this place was just packed with the neighbors. And it was so neat, to be a part of that. And I thought, we want to come every 18th, but of course we haven't.
And then also another problem is because of the pandemic, people have really been re-educated not to go to church.
Yeah, right.
Because we told them, you don't have an obligation to go to church during the pandemic. And it's better not to. And sometimes we close the doors, We had to, and it was really serious at the very beginning of the year 2000, the spring. So we had to, people have been desensitized about going to church. But little by little it's getting, it's going. As far as the small towns are concerned, the little towns up in the mountains, in Álamos, like San Bernardo, if you go up there and say, you call up the sacristan and you say, we're going to be there on such and such a day, you might have 5 or 6 people that come to church. But if you allow them to tell you when they want you to come, they're packed. You can't find them. Like, for example, they like to do the anniversaries of their deceased. If their deceased died on July 5th, they want July 5th every year, their event. And then they tell all their relatives and friends. Okay, where are all the relatives and friends in San Bernardo? They're in Navajo and Overton because they have to get a job. So people, those small towns were once quarries. They were quarries for population. But there's been an urbanization of the population. Agriculture has become urbanized. So you have the growth of Álamos, the growth of Overton and Navajo. They're huge cities. Okay. So, ready? Everybody here? Who remembers the three ships of Christopher Columbus? What were their names?
The Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria.
Okay, why was it called Santa Maria? Remember the flagship of Christopher Columbus? What was the name of the flagship?
I don't know.
La Santa Maria.
Maria.
Why was it called La Santa Maria? Okay, if you ask anyone from Logroño, Spain, where they produce La Rioja wine, they're going to tell you that because La Balvanera was the patron of the ship, Balvanera, Our Lady of Balvanera. And that's the name of this chapel, Our Lady of Balvanera. Okay, how did it get all the way from there to here? Okay, in Spain, in a province called Logroño, where La Rioja wine is produced, they talk about this man that heard somebody praying in the fields, someplace, and so he wanted to kill that person. But that person, by hearing their prayers, he decided to convert. He said, I'm not going to kill the person. And he retired into a hermetic life. And then he was, I'll read it here, it says. One day he was praying in his cave as a penitent. And an angel appeared to him, which asked him to go to Balvanera to look for an oak tree that was coming out that was larger than the rest, and at the foot of which a fountain was coming out, a fountain of water. And inside the tree, he would see various like roots that were, He said, there you will find an image of the Blessed Mother. And that they don't want it to remain hidden for any longer time. So that was why it was venerated in Spain, Our Lady of Balvanera. So what happened here, they have their own story, what happened. Their story is that the image of Balvanera in La Aduana has something to do very, very closely with the discovery of mines here. It dates from 1683. The legend narrates that the indigenous people, the Indians, who were going by this region, saw a small maiden on the top of a large cactus. So, in order to rescue her, they brought large rocks from right near where it was to the foot of the cactus, but once they got on the top of the rocks to get her, she disappeared. So then they saw that where the place where they had taken the rocks, they saw evidence of silver. So that's why the Indians thought that the discovery of silver had to do with a miracle, and that the woman that they saw had something to do with it. It taught them where the place was. So the first Spanish people, the first Spanish miners that came here were from Logroño, Spain. And that's why they said, oh, that must have been Our Lady of Balvanera. And that's how the name Our Lady of Balvanera. Okay, the image that you see over the altar is a painting. Okay, if you go to Spain, it's on the Camino de Santiago, the Way of Santiago. One of the places is where the Balvanera came. And I asked people, I said, can you bring me an image? I gave the image to somebody else. It was a picture of a small statue, similar to the one that we saw in Zapopan, small, and a very pale face. And so the painting is certainly not anywhere near, it doesn't look at all like the statue that they have in Balvanera, Spain. So there's also, besides that, there's another small one, another small image that's not too far, I think it's beneath the image. But the people who come here, this place is so filled with pilgrims on the evening of the 20th of November that you can't see the chapel. In order to come here to say Mass, I have to drive all the way around the park to get it. And then I have to walk down to get into the church. But if you're up there, you can't see the church. It's like an anthill with people all over the place, and then they're selling things all the way down the creek. This year they didn't have it because of the COVID. But it's for the last 9 days, from the 12th of November, you'll see people walking on the highway between Navajoa and Álamos. I walked that one night, when I got here, I thought, now I have to walk to Álamos after. And I was walking up, and a car came up, and he said, "Do you need a ride?" And I said, "Yes." Because there are people, in order to fulfill their promises, in other words, they ask Our Lady of Balvanera for a favor. They say, "If you heal my child," or whatever, they ask whatever they want. If I pass this test, those are called mandados. I think it's mandas, not mandados. Mandados are when you go shopping. Mandas is what you ask God to do for you, and if He does it, then you promise something. So they promise to walk from Navajoa to Aduana, or from Obregon. Some people even walk further.
Wow.
So, but if you can't do it, then you can say, well, I'm going to drive people, I'm going to help people along the way with my car. I'll bring them water, I'll bring them food. So that's what they did. They picked me up and took me to the Álamos monastery that night, because I was so tired after walking all the way from Navajoa to here. So any questions?
You did your penance.
You did my penance. Does anybody have any questions before we go in? The
One
church.
thing about the Virgin, pardon me, is that she, throughout Europe, wherever you see an image of her, she's over a plant, usually.
Oh.
And that's another connection with the organ pipe cactus, is it's a
Yes.
plant.
It
And
is, yeah.
you'll see that she's sitting over like a pine-type plant.
Okay, the
So-
interesting thing about that cactus is that the same cactus? I doubt it. I doubt that would be the same cactus that the Blessed Mother appeared over as a young maiden. Because when seeds are often brought by droppings of birds, and they're dropped on the roof, and then a cactus will grow. Well, when people saw this cactus here, and it's been there ever since I've been here and before, people, if you go up there closer, you'll see little candle, holders and stuff like that as a part of their devotion. I don't think it has anything to do with the original. It
No,
could.
but
Well,
no,
one of the
it
things
is a
I
sign,
heard,
yeah.
one of the things I heard was when they saw this cactus growing out of the side of the church, they thought, "Oh, we can't have that." So they cut it down, but it grew back. And so then they thought, "Oh, it's supposed to be here."
More than 80 years old to be now tell me that it's always been the same.
Yeah?
Yep. And then there's an image at a certain time of day of a woman with a child at her feet.
Oh.
It reflected on the inside.
Question, there must have been another structure out here. You can see where the beams
Okay.
used to be. You see the one wooden beam up there?
Just for
Well,
scaffolding.
I've heard
Maybe a
that this
porch.
church and the Church of Álamos were built at the same time. That's what I heard.
No,
And there was another
this church is 100 years old.
100 years old and one in Álamos, so it's
This
three.
one was started in the late 1600s and was finished around 1720.
And that's the date that they give here, 1683. So Aduana, why was Aduana called La Aduana? It was called La Aduana, which means the custom house, because the road between here and Ajiabampo is someplace down on the coast, where silver was taken from Álamos and brought all the way down. Well, it had to stop here. It had to stop here in order to be checked, to be right. Remember that at that time, this was part of Spain. This was a colony of Spain. It was not Mexico.
That was the king's theft.
So it was a king's theft. If you go in Spain, you can see beautiful altars that are, the retablos are made out of gold. And where the kings are buried and stuff like that. Well, that's where it came from. It came from the New World.
But there was another structure here and nobody knows what it was.
Okay, maybe you can answer that question. Was there another structure before this structure, or you
No,
think this is the
Because
original?
you can see where the beams were
No,
extended.
I don't think so. Those are, I'm
So
told
there's a
that
beam up there,
that's-
you can see it.
I'm told that was scaffolding. I was told that was the scaffolding poles to build it.
Wow.
And they just never covered them over.
Huh.
Yeah. So also it has one bell tower. And,
Yeah, it used to be, you could pay them a few pesos and you could walk up.
oh, that was a long time ago.
By the way-
Yeah, to the bell tower.
Probably if you looked at it now, you wouldn't wanna do
before
that.
we go in to see this, because this might be the last time I need to speak. Errol wanted me to tell you an anecdote about what happened to me one time in the church. when Carol O'Connor was coming to church. Well, yeah, as I told you before, I wasn't watching television, so I knew nothing about the movie called the series called All in the Family. I didn't know anything about it. Well, somebody said, "Hey," after the mass was over, "Did you know that you gave Holy Communion to Carol O'Connor?" And I said, "Who's that?" You know, and they said he's an actor and from Hollywood, you know. So anyway, I was in the sacristy after mass one day. He used to come to the noon mass when he was in town. He was not in town that often. He came into the sacristy, and his wife was right behind him. Nancy was her name. And he said, "I'd like to give a check, a donation to the church." So he pulls out a check and he starts filling it in. I said, "Would you like me to spell the name of the church? You know, Purísima Concepción, you know, Parroquia de la Purísima Concepción." And his wife says, "He's not Archie Bunker here, he's Carol O'Connor." And I said, "Okay, excuse me." And he wrote it perfectly by himself. He knew Spanish. No, the original doesn't have any crown on it. And this one has a crown on it too, but it doesn't, neither of them looks like the original. Somebody brought it to me, some people swapped.